All right, everybody, welcome to Behind the Bar with your host, me, Danny Johnson, where we take a look at your favorite dry bar comedians, get inside their brains, see how they operate. Behind the Bar is sponsored by RX Solutions. If you are underinsured or underinsured or uninsured, and you want up to 75% off your next prescription, go to rxsolutions.online to find out more. My guest today is Costaki Economopoulos, the biggest name in comedy.
Well said.
Whose dry bar special is called Now That I'm Grown Up. Did you remember what the title was? A lot of people don't remember what their title was.
If you made me remember it, I could probably get it together, but I didn't know it off the top of my head. I have a mental image of the cover now that you mentioned it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's Now That I'm Grown Up. He's a regular on Bob and Tom. He's a co-host or host of your own podcast, All Pro Lines, right?
Right. Yeah. We're doing that every week during the football season and about once a month in the off season. Come enjoy some football comedy.
Yeah. If you like football and you like comedy, you'll like All Pro Lines. And they have a Facebook account and other social media too. Check that out. And you have from what I saw, 4 comedy albums, right?
Well, it depends how you measure. I did a 3-disc set of Economopoulos from the Bob and Tom show. Okay. So that's not traditional stand-up, but it's all stand-up-ish. It's like It's like some of the highlights of the radio calls over the years. That was kind of a fun thing. So I'm not sure how you count that one, but yeah, I've got a few albums. In fact, I'm talking about possibly recording the next one in December. I haven't committed to that yet, but I'm about there.
Yeah, that's great. So, and I saw your tour dates. You're working quite a bit all over, and must, it's what seems like in preparation for that potential album, right?
Yeah. And also, it's kind of been my bread and butter for years is going to these Bob and Tom markets where people know me. And even if they're small towns without a club, in some ways that's better because then they're like, hey, a comedy show. We don't have that normally. And it's Costaki. We know him, yeah. So I'm going to a lot of these sort of mid-size middle American cities that are sort of below, comedy club radar.
Right.
They've been great. I'm doing Farmington and Albuquerque. Albuquerque's a big city. I'm doing those pretty soon.
Yeah, the Bob and Tom reach is I know it's not the reach that this podcast has, this enormous, but yeah, Bob and Tom reach is incredible.
But you're growing, and they're probably shrinking. So maybe you guys will meet somewhere in the middle.
So some people don't know. So I met you many, many years ago through Tom Simmons, I believe.
Yeah.
Who I had on this podcast. And my favorite memories of hanging out with you are going back to the Bob Shoemaker days, Coconuts Comedy Club.
Oh, my goodness.
So this is you, Danny Bevins, Tom Simmons, and Daryl Lennox used to go to his house and spend an X amount of weeks there writing and then performing at the various venues. And then I was invited through Tom to kind of hang and feature for you guys, which was a thrill to me starting out in comedy. You're a great comic and writer. Tom's great. Daryl's, they're just surrounded by talent. And I'm staying in the house. I got the downstairs with Daryl Lennox. And he was just a mess. I mean, there was Q-tips and tissues on the floor. And I remember going, it was either you or Tom, and go, is a friggin', I'm a neat freak. I can't. And you guys are like, he's legally blind. I was like, I didn't know he was legally blind. That's why he's missing the trash can. So my weird memory of you, Costaki, you're the first and only person I've ever seen. I remember coming upstairs and you're kind of sitting on the chair with your back of your knees over one of the arms. Your back is on the other arm of the chair, and you're eating a green pepper like an apple.
Yeah.
And I thought it made me stop. I was like, what kind of serial killer am I staying with?
That's bad. If I'm the biggest threat in that house of the people you described, Bob and his weirdo son, and there's a bunch of characters in that house. I still do that sometimes, and cucumbers too. I'll just eat them, just grab one and eat it.
Yeah, you don't cut it up. It was just so odd to me. This green thing was like, I was like, I don't know about hanging out with this guy.
Got to get your vegetables, Danny.
Right. But those were great times. I learned so much. I think I was probably barely a feature act at the time, and having to feature for you and do that full 30 you guys were so helpful in that process.
I'm happy to hear that. That was one of the peak, most memorable little chunks of comedy of my whole life. I mean, 9/11 had just happened, and my dad had suddenly died out of the blue, and I had weird long hair and was kind of on the road trying to figure out what the hell, what life seemed sad and beautiful and wonderful, and we all went there to try to figure out how to grow as comics, and we experimented with this goofy show. I don't know if you remember this, but we would all take turns and do different things. I finally convinced him to bring one of those little deli bells on stage where you go ding.
Huh.
And that way that was kind of the sign that we were switching comics. And that way we could do it sort of somewhat improvisationally. Like I would do a couple lines about 9/11, and then Danny would run up and ding the bell, and I had to sit down, and he get to talk about 9/11, and then that would remind Tom of something, and he would go ding, and Danny would come off. We did this it was an interesting way to explore a multi-person stand-up show. So it was still stand-up, but it just had this other little element and allowed us to work on jokes because, if you did some new lines that sucked, someone would just ding you out and bust your balls, and it was fine.
Yeah.
It didn't tank the show. So it was actually a really good element to add to a show where we were exploring doing more writing,
Yeah.
It was fun. Yeah. I love that. What was that? How long was that? Was it 3 weeks or something?
Yeah. I don't know that I stayed the full amount of time. I don't think I could with the day job at the time. So I just stayed a little bit. I remember doing spots and/or featuring. I do remember being relieved that whoever hosted it, or whatever show we were on, whoever hosted it had to bring you up, and I didn't have to remember how to pronounce your name as a feature.
Yeah, Danny hosted some. Danny, to this day, I'm astounded by this capacity. Danny could think of a joke 5 minutes before the show and walk up cold when hosting it without saying hello and open with it and have gravitas with it and make it sing on the first try. It was inconceivable to me.
Yeah. Let him drink it. Want it to be like Jonestown. 7.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, Tom's a freaky good writer, and Daryl so creative and interesting, and it was what a great few great little
Daryl
run.
Still doing it? Where is he? I haven't heard much about him.
You know what? He got a show. He was he was the star of a sitcom for a half a second.
Huh.
And I think last I knew, he lived in New York City. Now it's been a minute. I haven't talked to him in a while. But last I knew, he was traveling around telling jokes and doing his thing.
Good for him, man. I liked watching him a lot too. So let's go back to your dry bar special a little bit. I watched it again today. It was it's around this. I don't know if it was around the same time as me, but the length of our specials were the same, roughly 40 minutes. And that was the new way is 20 minutes now. It's a much shorter. So we had the longer set. So we were probably around the similar time. As you I guess walk me through, when you found out you got it, right? You were asked to do it. You have a plethora of material. You have to be clean. You're not filthy, but you're a comic. You do what you do. So how do you go about taking your whatever X number of hours of stuff and kind of go, this is the 40 I want to display?
Yeah, I think if you do it well, it's a lot of work. I worked hard at it. You kind of have the muscle a little bit prepped and ready as a real kind of multi-venue road comic, because sometimes you wind up doing a corporate gig where you sort of doing the same thing. You wind up on a cruise ship, or you're doing a college where it's like, okay, this is not a bar set where we're going to be explicit and political and sexual and, whatever. It's a different gear. And it's a gear that I feel good about doing. It's just, it takes some doing to make sure that because for dry bar, not only are you doing clean, but you're not doing adult themes even.
Right.
And definitely not religion, and probably not politics. So there's some, and you got to be careful with edge, even like a joke that's somewhat edgy that you would do on Conan or something. You might not do it in a dry bar special. So these are different gradations, and maybe I'm getting a little too in the weeds for a non-comic, but it takes some doing to prepare for that. And I actually booked a couple of these sort of mid-sized markets right before I did the taping. I think I did Whitefish, Montana, and some other small town up in that part of the world. And I'm doing, and those are like gritty bar gigs, and I'm sticking to my dry bar practice. So that took some doing to stay in the groove and do the clean version of everything and make sure that I had the segues from this chunk to that chunk to that chunk. Yeah, it took some work, but I felt good about the outcome. I loved the setup that they had with the taping. The crowd was really good. It was a good physical layout. The staff there was super cool and friendly. And even post-production, like, they wanted my input on some of the edits. They didn't just like take it and do it and let me know at the end. You know, I was really impressed with some of the beats of the process with them.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It was first class all the way, and you could tell it's one of those crowds that really want to be there. They want comedy. They want to laugh. They want to enjoy themselves. But you're right, that packet you get to prepare you for the special is pretty detailed about what you can and cannot kind of broach. You know, it's like it even goes into, if you're going to talk about your spouse, try not to be too demeaning and be more self-deprecating. Right.
Your packet might have been a little more detailed than mine. I don't know if I was a little bit earlier in the process or something.
Right.
I wasn't, but I knew in my guts, like, we're talking to, you know, in some cases, teenage Mormons. This is not a club set. This is a totally different thing. And I found that to be an interesting challenge. In fact, way back in the day, when I was like, just like a little embryonic headliner in comedy, back to back, I did Salt Lake City and Pensacola. And at the time, the Salt Lake City Club was all ages.
Okay.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the one that I did was no drinking. So it was a very clean Mormon kind of a set. And the very next week, I was headlining Pensacola Coconuts. And at the time, the headline, the house MC was, oh man, his name just eluded me. Do you know this? It was like an old road headliner who you'd like tore the roof off places, and he was filthy and good at improv. He was like the most impossible thing to follow.
Is this in Greensboro?
No, this was Pensacola, Florida.
Oh, Pensacola.
Sammy Smith.
Okay, no.
Sammy Smith, very funny, like one of those kind of like true gritty road comics. He would drink and he had long hair. He looked like he played for Motley Crue,
right.
and he was really funny and very good at improv and filthy. And he would host and do like 45 minutes and then hand it off to you.
Right.
And so I was able to handle a late show following Steve and headline basically the all ages Mormon show. And I thought, okay, I got range. I can do, these are the two bookends of what comedy is.
Right.
And so I've always prided myself on being able to work a cruise ship. I never wanted to get a gig and go, I can't say yes to that. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's one of the things I'm proud of in stand-up, that I could do. I could follow Sammy Smith, and I could do 40 minutes for the dry bar special.
Yeah. I remember in Jacksonville, you were headlining, and you had a bit that was racially charged, and it was just, I believe it was just making fun of and a point about different racial nicknames and how ridiculous they are. And the owner talked to you about it in the back of the room, and I think you made not to the owner, but afterwards, that over his shoulder was a big painting of George Carlin.
Yeah. I remember that. I can't believe you remember that.
I remember.
That was a big moment for me.
Yeah.
Oh, I just smiled. He gave me a whole speech. Yeah. I was mad because it was a piece about language and the things. It was clear that it was a thoughtful piece about language and some things that maybe you should be careful about saying. And then I said them, right? And he didn't think I should say them.
Right.
And I should also say the guy, the middle act that week, I believe maybe it was the MC. One of the other acts on the show did like a 10-minute homophobic character. It was really terrible.
Right.
No, it said nothing to him about that.
Right.
And when he was giving me this little talk about how I can't say these words in his club, I just grinned ear to ear because I could see there's like a 6-foot painting of George Carlin literally behind him while he's still. I go, what do you think he would say if you told him that the same thing? What do you think? He didn't think that was quite as beautiful a moment as I did. If you gave the same speech to George Carlin, what do you think he would say right now?
Right.
He was wrong, but I understood where he was coming from. You know,
he may have gotten a complaint, or he perceived the customers were a customer was unhappy or something. Who knows?
Well, he said, I remember this. He said, I have black waitresses. You can't say that stuff in the club.
Yeah.
So it came from a place of protecting the people that were working with him.
Yeah.
Which I get. I understand that. I mean, and if the intention was certainly not to upset the black waitresses, that's not the bit.
Sitting in your hotel room, I can't wait till I get up there. And upset the.
Do you have any gay waitresses by any chance?
Anybody even thinking about it?
And the way they booked that club, I mean, that's the schlockiest, they booked some really terrible comics in that place. They were doing awful things all the time. And he never said boo to them, I'm sure.
Yeah, he just didn't see it. So, hey, here's do you remember hosting me in New York City and going to
oh my goodness,
Comedy Cellar? This was back in it was just one night. We went to you and your ex.
We went down to Comedy Zero, ground zero of modern American stand-up comedy. We went to that club, hung out.
Yeah, and I just remember my favorite memory. Well, it was just my first and only time there, and it was really special to me to go to that club and kind of be not a comic that's booked, but a comic in there and not like a regular audience member. So it was a huge deal for me,
Right.
So we're sitting there, and who we were with was like, hey, talking about maybe getting us spots that night or impromptu, and the booker, who I think is still the booker, that woman, just showed us the lineup for the 11 o'clock show, and she's like, where do you want me to put them? I got to tell Colin Quinn,
right,
Jeffrey Ross, like, where do you want me to? And I was like, what about Danny Johnson?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
She was really brutally tough with me. Yeah. She was like, yeah, Dave Chappelle's coming in. Like, I don't know. You're not. She was very point blank. Like, no.
But isn't that better though? Don't you think that's better than?
Yeah.
Kind of leading you on.
And it makes sense that she's not wrong, and it's not disrespectful, and it wasn't meant to be mean, and it wasn't pointed, and
Yeah.
Actually, I went to a wedding years later, and she didn't remember who I was, but when I saw her face, like, all of that conversation came rushing back into my body, like, oh yeah, I remember that. She's right. I mean, you got to really earn your stripes to get onto that stage, and that makes sense.
And we want prime time. I mean, it was like the meat of the night. It wasn't like, hey, can we get a spot at 2 a.m.? It was.
Now, if you'll indulge me, I'll tell you the story on the other end of the spectrum. I used to do sets at Broadway Comedy Club. Do you know that one?
Mm-hmm.
Like 53rd or something. And that one, the lineups were atrocious every single night. You come in there and you read the lineup and you go, are we within 100 yards of some of the best comics to ever do stand-up? Why aren't they in here?
Yeah.
And I would routinely not get spots. And one night I was in there and I was mad about this. And there's a chalk draw, the chalk lineup, and I'm literally gesturing to it. And I go, what are we doing?
Yeah.
There's at least 700 comics who are within 50 blocks right now, who are better than that. What are we doing?
Yeah.
You're a New York City club. And the booker walked by me during the speech to my friend. I didn't know who it was.
Right.
And it didn't help me get spots for the next year. That's for sure. But I ended up becoming friendly with the booker later and apologized about that. And he understood it. I mean, I was a frustrated comic who was, but yes, at the Cellar, it's the opposite. Like every single show is just the best that do this,
Yeah.
so
I wonder if Caroline Comedy, that's still there, right? Is that in Times Square?
yeah. Yep.
That's still around, I'm sure. They do more of a standard format, right? Like
That's the only one traditionally. And now things come and go, and I haven't been there in a while, but that's the only one over the big long haul that stuck to the old fashioned headliner does an hour ish.
yeah.
Most of the clubs in the city are showcase, you do
So
7, you do 10, you do 12,
yeah, I know you grew up in Georgia, but you used to live in New York. Are you out of New York permanently and on the West Coast now?
Yeah, I think so. I did 10 years in New York, which I enjoyed, and I missed some of it. I love walking to everything.
Yeah.
And actually I found a pretty good where I'm sitting right now. We're in LA, and I'm walkable to a grocery store and the elementary school and a really cool farmer's market and an outdoor mall and the gym and a pool. And I kind of tried to find some of that I like, and I have good climate,
Yeah.
and it's a lot cheaper here,
What
for me,
brought you out to the West Coast? The comedy or just more opportunity?
my big kid's mom got a job.
Okay.
So I did, you can't not live in the same city with your kid. And she couldn't say no to the job. So we up
Right.
and came, for that. And at this point, that kid just started ninth grade. So at this point, I'm committed to being in this apartment for 4 years.
Yeah.
And after that, I don't know. I probably won't pick to stay here, but we'll see.
Yeah. I wonder how much, like New York, how hard it's going to be getting spots in LA if you ever want to or need to.
In the old days, I was it's funny. I got into all the clubs, the Melrose Improv and the Laugh Factory in Hermosa Beach. And there were a couple of other kind of quirky, cool rooms. And I finally got into them all, cracked all those nuts. And then I moved to New York. I was like, crap. And now I came back, and really only Hermosa even is remotely the same people, and they remember me. You have to kind of start over again. And I just haven't done it yet. I've
Yeah.
just been with
Is that the
football
Comedy
season.
Magic Club? Is that Hermosa?
Yeah, it's so good. That's a great one.
I heard
That one's very
the
much that's one of the only ones here that feels like a road club, where it's like
Mm.
grown-ups who like good jokes,
Yeah.
It's not too hip and artsy or young or weird, non-native English speakers, some of the other things you have in some other places. It's almost like it reminds me like of Charlie Goodnights or something,
Yeah. I went out to LA a couple times. Twice, Bob Saget got me some spots in different places on two
Oh,
different
wow.
occasions. And it was, I mean, the big one was the Laugh Factory. And he put me on Latino night. Or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
And I got 3 minutes. I don't think I did well. The guy, a buddy of mine, Danny, who was with me, he said I did well. I don't think I did well, but the guy that went up after me had a Kermit the Frog puppet and played the piano and killed. And I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like, because I went to LA thinking I got to be this like really unique, like my materials got to be, whatever, just the perception of that. And then this guy gets up there and he's like, I know Kermit,
Yeah, right.
kills it. And Damon, the next time I went, I got bumped by Damon Wayans, and who did an hour and change on I guess what was considered a booked open mic that Saget got me a spot on. So I was supposed to go on at like whatever 10:30, and then it was like midnight by the time I got on because Damon Wayans just came in and did it.
Oh, you went on after Damon Wayans did an hour and change?
He did an hour and change. I just went up there and did my 3 minutes or whatever. It was it was awful.
Oh, that's
But
brutal.
I remember going to these like little beatnik coffee shops that some other friends had gotten me spots at. And it was for the most part just comedians in the crowd. And I remember like most of them were either reading a paper or going over their notes.
Yeah.
No laughs. I'm like, why am
Yeah.
I doing? One guy, oh my God, what did he say? Something like well done. Like I did a joke and he's like, well done in the front row. Like, I was like, what is, just laugh. Like if you, I'm sure he's being sarcastic because it was probably a crappy joke, but it just was so uninspiring. I thought I was going to be it's this magical.
Oh, yeah.
place. And it was very disappointing.
What's magical about LA is anything can happen.
Yeah.
There's something kind of exciting about it's almost like you've got lottery tickets in your hand. you know,
Right.
because sometimes something does, you know, like somebody does grab you and now you're the wacky neighbor on a thing, or
Mhm.
they need you to do one line in a commercial, or they need a, I really need you to help me write on this project. Sometimes that happens, but most of the time it's a crazy slog. And you know, you're like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, it's the same problem in New York. It's even more so in New York, in my opinion, because the climate's so bad. You find yourself like freezing your butt off waiting for a train at 2 a.m, and you come home and you made $25 and you were out for 7 hours,
Yeah.
and the big table at the show you did were from Iceland and didn't get any of your jokes about politics or football. And you go, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
At least when you do Farmington, there's a pile of money in your pocket at the end, and you talk to people who are excited about seeing you, you know?
Yeah.
So
And
I've
you
always
get follow,
struggled.
and they start to follow, your social media. It's all connected when you do shows like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for me, I've always been on, you know, there's a little bit of a divide sometimes in the comedy universe of like road guys and city guys.
Yeah.
I'm very much in the road camp, and I always see working the city as just another way to improve my road existence. That's the reason you go to the city in the first place, so you can get enough
Yeah.
media exposure that you can sell the tickets in Farmington.
And you can charge more, right?
Right. And people come to see you on purpose, and then
Yeah.
creatively you're freer, and you say yes to the better gigs, and the lesser gigs sort of get rotated out of your life. And so you're happier and you're more creative, and you know, you can aim higher with your jokes, and you can write smarter. And there's this whole kind of machinery that goes along with succeeding. And for me, like, to me, that was always the point. Like, I didn't really want to be a wacky neighbor on a show. And
Right.
I would do that kind of a thing if it helped me sell tickets eventually to what I really love doing. That to
Yeah.
me that was a different goal than what a lot of comics have, you know.
It's funny you mentioned that. Tom Simmons and I talked a little bit about this, about, we wanted just to stand up because he's gotten a few acting gigs speaking. On the Hulu, my girlfriend and I were watching the show on Hulu, Single Drunk Female, and all of a sudden Tom's the bartender. He got a funny line, he's in multiple episodes, and then he was in something else, and he's writing for Miss Pat, and then he appeared in a Miss Pat episode. And it's like, we talk about, if our goal is just to do stand up, be creative, be funny, and it's so helpful if you get those few key, that exposure where you can start charging more, you can be the door deal, and it gives you that freedom to just do, like today, I can't go do a Looney Bin comedy club, which I heard they're great, but they don't pay for airfare, they pay for hotel, but I would essentially break even, almost, maybe make a few $100s for 4 days. I just can't do
Right.
that because
Right.
I can't charge more. So a lot of guys, like, so if we talked a little bit about even Orny Adams, you know who he is, right?
Yeah, sure.
He was huge on this TV show Teen Wolf. He was the gym coach. And when I
Okay.
worked with him, sold out in a quick amount of time, sold a ton of merch, lined around the front of the building to take pictures with him.
Huh.
And that's all it took, was just he was in almost every episode, but he was the gym coach.
Right.
And all
I
of a
didn't even
sudden,
know that, but yeah, that's why Orny lives in LA.
yeah,
I saw him at the farmer's market. That's why you hang out in these kind of markets, so that you can get these breaks and get these kind of jobs,
yeah,
and then feed your other dream. I mean, that's why I do it. Now,
yeah,
somebody like Orny might actually want that to be the end goal, that he would wind up
yeah,
as the star of a show. That might be even more of a goal than to be a stand. I don't speaking for Orny, but some comics have
right.
that goal instead. That's never been mine personally.
No, and it's such a disparity in obviously the pay between door deal and or even a flat fee with the giant following versus what we get paid, what
Oh, sure. Yeah.
some people get paid for a regular show. There's a comic that's on Cobra Kai. He plays the cousin of Daniel LaRusso, and he's a comic. I think his name's Brad something, I forget. And he tours with a bit of a following and charges more, and it's good for him. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it just takes a role or two. And I know Tom, I was teasing Tom because he just got picked for that show on Hulu. Like he didn't audition or anything. He's just somebody knew somebody who thought he had the right look, and he was sheepish about it. I'm like, what? And at the end, I was just like, what? Just we have to end this. Just go keep getting picked randomly for TV shows and writing. Idiot.
I'm so happy that he finally got a couple of cool breaks, and they were perfect timing too.
Yeah.
Like he got a writing job during a global pandemic when comics
Yeah.
couldn't work. I mean, that's like the stars aligning and finally giving him a break. He's been overdue for a break forever.
For sure.
Yeah, that's good. Love it.
Earlier you mentioned us not tiptoeing, but when you're preparing for the dry bar and delivering your dry bar, it's like trying not to be too mean-spirited or edgy, or maybe not edgy, we're going to the edge. But in listening to your set again, I thought you did a great job of kind of doing a little bit of that.
Oh
so
yeah, I did a chunk on there about the custody battle, which I'm surprised they let me do.
Well, yeah. Well, if you notice, when you mention the word divorce, the room gets a little quiet. Where's he going with this? Just for 2 seconds.
Right.
And I thought I was so happy to hear that you say that. Not that it went silent. I was so happy it went. I was hoping it would go totally south.
I mean, I met her. I'm kidding.
Even little lines in your act about when you do the callback of the toaster. Divorces should you should get presents at divorce, not at the wedding, because when you're in your apartment and lonely, you could use a brand new toaster. And I forget how you said it, but if things get bad, you could take that in the bathtub.
Oh, right, yeah.
Alluding to suicide, and they loved it. I mean, you're still doing, hitting the edge a little bit.
Yeah. I couldn't do 40 minutes with no edge, but I could carve it down. And I think smart, clever edge is welcome in most comedy environments, as long as it's, as long as it's not too edgy, as long as it's not, like I used to do a joke a million years ago about, basically it's kids can choke on a marshmallow. And I'm like, no, nobody who can't survive a marshmallow is going to cure cancer. It was playful and kind of smart, but in the end, there's a kid there's a kid who dies in this joke. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's an example of something that you could do on the Tonight Show.
Right.
But maybe not on a cruise ship first show,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a whole nother category of thing. But yeah, I think, and in doing jokes about the exes, I got some good advice, I think, from Tom Griswold from Bob and Tom. He had a couple of comics, I won't name names, but he did to me when he gave me the advice. He goes, he comes in here and he's trashing his wife for like 7 minutes on the air. Like, you picked her, nobody wants to hear somebody that angry, at another person that you were married to. And I think that's true. So what I've tried to do, and I don't always nail it, but I try to walk the line of talk about what's hard for me and be human and real about it without being gigantically derogatory about the other party. Because it's still the mom of your kid. And, even when things are yucky, it's still a dynamic that's got humanity in it,
Yeah. It's that's really well said and well done in your special too. You're right, because there's so many comics that will go to the easy, oh, my ex is a B, whatever, she treats me that's right. Where's the real funny? You know what I mean? Get to the real. A,
we don't know if that's really true, and B, even if it is, that's kind of a pedestrian take, right?
Yeah,
right.
I can almost guarantee they also have a beat your kids bit. Right. And get all the crowd all riled up for a good beating of the children when they get home. I've had the hardest time. So and this just recently, when I like to listen, when I listen to the sets like that, when you say the word divorce and they kind of change tone, a couple other guys I've interviewed, comedians I've interviewed, have had similar instances, whether they mention something tragic in their lives. And I've been trying to do this bit. It's not even a bit yet. I don't even know where the funny is, but the long and short of it is when I got blood work done not too long ago, and they said there's something fishy in your blood work that's typically only found in your bone marrow.
Oh, wow.
It's found outside, which may be an indication of leukemia.
Oh,
And I'm like, all right, what do you want me to do? Like, I don't know. We'll see you in 6 months for some more. We're just gonna let that leukemia bounce around that big old body. So, but the minute I mention leukemia, the audience just shuts down because they know somebody who's died or
yeah.
So I'm going to keep trying to wordsmith it or whatever, but I just think it's funny that they're, thankfully, as of 6 months ago, everything's changed. They don't even show it anymore. So there's no risk, but just the fact that they told me for like 18 months to like, just come on back in 6 months. We'll see if that cancer bouncing around that body. It's like,
sleep tight.
Sleep tight, right? It's awful.
That is awful.
So
yeah,
let's,
I have a leukemia bit in my act now. It's brand new about my brothers. Yeah, my brother survived leukemia.
Oh,
got a whole bone marrow transplant. That's crazy. His story. It's a crazy miracle. He's around. Yeah.
Are you? It's newer. It's a newer bit.
The bit's new. The leukemia is old.
Oh, how funny is leukemia?
Yeah, it takes a while to find the right end.
Right. Hi-oh.
I don't have to tell you. It's challenging.
Right.
But as long as you know that that's part of the thing, I actually got separated again recently, and I've been talking about that on stage. And I talked to a manager type out here, and he goes, "You got some great jokes about this, but I want to see some of the pain. I don't want it to just be jokes." So it's interesting. Like he actually has the creative note of have more layers to the stand-up and not just the ha 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 ha, right? And I've tried to experiment with that and talk a little bit about some of the things that are hard about it. Trying to talk about what's hard for me and not be complaining about her.
I would imagine what might be hard about that. One of the many things hard about that is that as you're discovering on stage, talking about it, you may discover something that's painful you didn't know about or didn't feel consciously.
Well, I haven't had that because, I can improv a little bit here and there, but I'm very much like I work on the thing before I go take it up there. So I've explored all these feelings, and of course I've had them for a long time, but it is a delicate balance because actually my mom came to the show this weekend and I got into it a different way than I normally do because somebody yelled something out. But her note afterwards, she loved the show, but she also said, it was kind of sad. There were a couple of moments where I felt like the crowd was like, "Aw," So maybe I've gone too far with that, and that's the work of what it is to be a comic, is to figure all this out, figure out how to talk about leukemia. That's your job.
How do how do you feel when you get through this newer bit about the separation? How do you feel after you get off telling those jokes? Is it therapeutic?
I don't know if it's therapeutic, but I do feel good about it creatively because I think it has another layer that's not just a good joke about Taco Bell or something. You know what I mean? There's more humanity in it than if you just write a good observational joke. So I feel I'm excited about that. And it also checks a box that I've been working on for a long time creatively, is to bring more humanity to the show than just good joke writing.
Yeah. I just shamefully thought about my Taco Bell joke as you said that. Is that what are you doing this separation just for new material? Is this what we're doing?
Well, you got to get something out of it.
Oh, geez. So I want to go into I won't keep you too much longer. I know you got to paint the wall behind you or something in your new apartment.
It's pretty bare.
Let's talk about All Pro lines, because I'm a huge NFL guy and I love your memes and I follow your Facebook page and whatnot. I did not know about the podcast, I'm ashamed to say, so I'll have to give that a listen. But All Pro lines.
Well,
yes,
that's a note for me. I got to do better promotion.
You have
if you're on the page
reviews.
and didn't know.
I know, right? You have wonderful reviews. I saw those when I clicked on it start listening to episodes. Except for you have one bad review, which is always the best.
I haven't looked lately.
It's hundreds of great you're almost a 5 rating, and it's just one person ranting about how I know you guys are liberals, but to go off on a tangent like this and then
yeah. Oh, we lost some listeners on one of them. Yeah, for sure. We actually have since shifted the kind of paradigm that we have. We don't do that kind of thing, not necessarily because we don't want to lose some people or get a bad review. We just made a decision like, there's plenty of politics in the world. We're not really going to do that here, you know?
What was your beginnings? Because you were, I don't know whether you wrote for the NFL or associated with the NFL. So what was sort of how did that come about in the beginning? Or was it Fox or something?
I just loved, it's always been a guilty pleasure of mine. Like back in the day, because I was a poli-sci major, I've always been a somewhat thoughtful human being. And I would see like these businessmen on airplanes, and they got the USA Today or some other version of the same thing. And there's literally a lap full of the news that matters in the world flat on their lap, and they've got it open to the sports section. I'm like, you're such an idiot.
Yeah.
You're wasting your life with the sports. And you know what? I discovered over time that I love fantasy football and I love the NFL, and it just made me happier than when I did the other things in my life.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? That judgy little, badger, I'm done with that. Yeah. Do what you want that you enjoy, that makes you happy in the world. And I've just gravitated towards it. And I was doing a segment on Bob and Tom that was a different subject every week. It was called the Economopoulos. It was basically a writing exercise. Like, right. I would just take anything with bullet points, like phobias. I could probably write 15 phobia jokes, Right. One time I did Dante's Inferno. I was like, there's 9 circles of hell. I can write 9 jokes. I can do this, So I pitched an all NFL topical joke version of that to sports radio, because I thought, okay, this segment that I'm doing on the radio is working. I could maybe do a similar thing on a parallel universe in sports.
Yeah.
And sports radio, for the most part, said, no, thank you.
Wow.
They very much have the feeling, again, this is a generalization, a broad generalization. Sports radio takes itself too seriously. They don't do entertainment content. They do X's and O's.
Right.
So I went back and I sort of did it with Bob and Tom and pitched it to them, and they liked it better than the other thing I was doing.
Okay.
So I just replaced the prior thing with an all NFL version of the Economopoulos, basically. And then I've since pitched it to some sports outlets and had a little bit of success, but mostly it sings in non-sports environments, even though it's about sports.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
I love it. My 2 favorite football related jokes of yours are one of them's in the Dry Bar special, alluding to the Super Bowl, the 28-3
Oh yeah,
debacle that the Falcons were up, and I think your friend said something like, "How was your day on a scale from 28 to 3 or something like that?"
Yeah.
And my other favorite joke, and I think I remember,
that's a true story, by the way.
Whoever said that's fun. I hope that was a comedian, but
that's good writing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Because he didn't do it up front. He didn't say on a scale from 28 to 3, how was your day? He said,
right. Oh yeah, see, that's good. Yeah, that's a pro.
Yeah.
I might have improved it in the rewrite, in the retell.
I hope this is you. This has to be you. In your act many moons ago, I think when fantasy football started to get really popular, but wasn't sort of as mainstream as it is now, I believe the bits go something like you're in a bar and a player gets hurt.
Oh yeah.
Edgar James gets hurt, and there's nothing more embarrassing than standing up in the middle of a bar yelling, "That's my fantasy guy."
Right. Yeah. That's my joke. Yeah, that's going way back. Yeah. He had a fantasy too, but I got a free drink. That's the tag.
Okay.
He had a fantasy too, but it was very different. That's the sequence of the tags.
Right.
Yeah. That joke still could have some life. once in a while. Sure. Yeah.
When you closed your dry bar on NFL jokes, you had the audience yell out their team, Raiders and Seahawks and Broncos. So do you have something in the ready for all these teams?
Yeah, I'm a little lazy about it because usually I get the same handful of teams.
Right.
I'm in the Midwest, so I get, Bears and Packers and Colts and Vikings a lot. And
Yeah.
then, of course, someone always yells Cowboys. So I've got some Cowboys jokes ready to go.
Yeah.
I should do a little bit of a better job, but yes, that's often a little section of my show that's somewhat interactive, and I'm still doing polished jokes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun that I can do both. I was always envious of some of these New York comics who are so good at doing crowd work. And over time, when you watch them, sometimes you realize like, oh, they're doing polished bits. They're just mixing them in with improv. And so that's kind of my version of that is I ask people how they became fans of their team, and sometimes some really interesting answers. And then I always have a joke about the Colts ready to go when I need it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's fun.
You know who's great at the audience improv / he's essentially just weaving them into his bits. The great bits is Big J Okerson.
Oh yeah. Jimmy Pardo too, in his own completely different way. So these are like crazy good artists at what they do. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I got to work with Big J, and I was in awe watching them night after night. I think it was 5 shows, and just the way he did it and sat down, and it's like he's talking to you in the living room, and then all of a sudden your gut bust. He's killing it, and rightfully so. Good bits too.
Right.
And you end on the female. Well, you end on that, but before that, you talk about the female referee, which is another one.
Oh yeah.
Favorites.
That's good writing, but I don't know if I would do that joke anymore. I feel like it's fine, but it's not what I want to do more of, because it's got a little bite in it about gender, it's kind of taking some shots at women in it.
Right.
I stand behind it, but it's not one of my favorite things now,
Right.
Yeah.
So what's your take on I grew up in Long Island, and I jokingly say I moved to Florida because I wanted my comedy career to go nowhere. But I'm a Giants fan. What's your take on my Giants this year?
Oh my, they're actually good. What's happening?
Yeah, 6-1, I think.
And the Jets are good too.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, there was a prop bet that you could bet over or under on wins for both New York teams. And it was like 5.5 total for both teams all season. And now, they've crushed it. You would have already won, and you got more than half a season left. It's amazing.
I just think we can't get into a deficit of more than 10 points. We're winning a lot of close games, but it reminds me.
Like they have been a little bit lucky too, but they're way better than expected. It's fun.
Coach Dable, Brian Dable.
Maybe he's the answer.
I think so. This is what the Giants remind me of. Every movie about a school or classroom where the new cool teacher comes in and motivates them, for the big test at the end of the year. And then even if they come up short, it's like a big feel-good story. You tried your best.
Well, yes. Even if if they're 10-7 or whatever this year, that's a great achievement from where they were and what we expected from them.
And they just traded away
Kadarius. Saw that today. I picked him up in a fantasy league.
He's your fantasy guy.
What are you doing with the other wide receivers? What's Kenny Galladay? What's happening?
He's got -1 receptions, and he's making $25 million a year or something like that.
What they have to do something different than what they're doing with him.
It's a very high salary for a team that's not, star-studded.
It's got no stars.
Right.
Saquon Barkley is the only one.
Right. And he's been hurt the last 2 seasons.
He's great. He's back. It's fun to watch him.
It is much more fun to watch now than when I was a kid growing up in the Bill Parcells ball possession, win the game 10-7 grind. Right. You know what I mean? Just Phil Simms throwing for 75 yards and winning it. Can't do it.
Wait, are you talking about the Falcons right now? You're talking about the 2022 Falcons?
Who do they have behind the helm? Mariota?
Yes, Marcus Mariota.
Don't they have a kid they drafted?
They do. Desmond Ridder. We're going to see him at some point. It's not Mariota, though. It's the coaching. They were down 21-0 to the Bengals. And what's their answer? Let's run the ball every time for an 8-minute drive. That's just a weird choice.
I saw a funny meme about the Jaguars because I live near Jacksonville, and that's my second team. But we've done Shad Khan has done all these renovations to the stadium and stuff like that, and it just went something like, "Hey, we need help on the offensive line." He's like, "How about a jumbo screen?" Like, "Hey, we need some wide receivers." Like, "How about a big pool in the end zone?"
That's funny.
Yeah, it's like, because that's exactly what had happened. We needed all this stuff, and he just kept, now we got $5 hot dogs.
How about an extra game in London?
Right.
Yeah, but that team's actually good too. Maybe Trevor Lawrence is for real.
I think
Travis
so.
Etienne's for real. This is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and they traded away Robinson to the Jets, the second back.
That shows some faith in Etienne. It's nice.
Yeah, that's a risk though, because he tore his ACL last year, right, to start his career.
It was the foot. It was Liz Frank.
Cool, man. Well, look, now that I'm a grown up, they should check out your Dry Bar special, get them royalties, and go to Costaki.com for all things Costaki, Costaki.com. All pro lines. I'm looking forward to catching up on the podcast and checking it out, man.
Yeah, man, you can be a guest sometime. We've traditionally had a no guest format, but this year we went to a single host instead of co-host. So now we're having more guests. So I'll have you on sometime and talk about your Giants.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you so much. Hang out here when we're done here, and we'll chat. But appreciate you being on.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me, Danny.
Oh, hold on.